Welcome back, everyone. This is the second episode of the Pyramid Sports Network FC podcast. My name is Quinn Blackman. I'm your host. And today we're going to get into the transfer news from around the leagues over these past couple of weeks since the window opened. We're going to get into some FA Cup action. We're going to get into some Carabao Cup semifinals that took place over the last 2 days. We're going to talk about some developments in AFCON, some manager situations, and we're going to cover it all today in this podcast. So let's get right into it. So the first thing I would really want to start off with is the third round of the FA Cup, which took place this past weekend, and it brought just all of the fireworks. So to begin, Macclesfield FC, they played host to Crystal Palace, and Crystal Palace did something very admirable, which was they didn't have an allotment of away seats because Macclesfield FC is in the sixth division of the English football pyramid, playing in the National League North division. And so what this means is that a lot of these players with Macclesfield are not full-time footballers. The National League and below the pyramid is considered semi-professional football at this level, and a lot of these guys are owning, so someone owned on the club a training center, someone owned, or someone was a teacher, someone like just working all these other crazy day jobs. And they come in and they play the cup holders in Crystal Palace on Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember, but they play them this weekend, and they are at a ground that's artificial turf, and you're never going to see artificial turf in the national or in the English football pyramid once you get into the league football. And the ground couldn't have held more than 10,000 people, but the town came out in full force, and they end up beating Crystal Palace 2-1 in arguably the biggest upset in the history of the FA Cup. They were 117 places off of Crystal Palace in the English football pyramid, and just pulled one of the most unbelievable upsets. It was they had a young man pass away, one of their young players. He was only 21 years old, and his name is Ethan McLeod, and he died in an automobile accident after one of their games on December 16, 2025. And before the game, there was a lot of talk about, how is Macclesfield going to respond to this? There was word that the captain of Macclesfield received a text from Ethan McLeod's father and was reluctant to share it with the rest of the team because he did not want to put even more pressure on them. But I think it's safe to say that football transcends a lot of things, and when you come across a situation like this with a tragic death of a player, you have to come together as a football community. And I think that it was really beautiful watching both teams honor this young man, and then just Macclesfield really playing in his honor. And it's hard to believe that the presence of Ethan McLeod was not on the pitch that day, because he was truly loved by his teammates, and it just turned into the most magical day ever. And they were over the loud system saying after the final whistle blows, just fans, please don't storm the pitch. And the first person on the pitch was the owner, and the owner came out and said a few days ago that he bought the team back in 2020 after a 4-day drinking bender, and he advised people not to do the same thing. But it's magic. It's the magic of the cup. And if you haven't watched the highlights, please, I encourage you to go to YouTube and watch the highlights of Macclesfield hosting Crystal Palace in the FA Cup, because it was truly, truly phenomenal to watch. It was a different style of football. It was not tactical. It was go push the ball up the field, be physical, get stuck in, just play for one another and play for Ethan McLeod. And I don't even know, obviously I wasn't in the dressing room, but I don't know if it was to discuss before the match, but you could tell that this team was playing for something bigger than themselves that day, whether and I think it encompasses both the town and the tragic passing of Ethan McLeod, and it it just turns into the most magnificent story. So Macclesfield, they play um, their upcoming match in the FA Cup. They will play Brentford, and they will host Brentford in Macclesfield, which another Premier League side, and it's going to be unbelievable to watch on February 14th on Valentine's Day, 9 a.m. Central Time. If you can find a way to watch this match, I encourage you to watch it because this is just really the beauty of the cup and what makes football so special. So, some other FA Cup highlights I wanted to discuss was we had let's see, we had United again. They lose again to Brighton 2-1, and it was just messy. It was um, a tough watch as an unbiased fan because United is just so out of their comfort zone right now and not what Manchester United is. They fired Ruben Amorim after, what seemed like too short of a time, in my opinion. And I think that he was keeping them in a good spot and had them, playing solid football, but it just there's expectations, and he was always being questioned because of, the treatment of Kobe Mano. And it just so they appoint Michael Carrick as the interim manager until the end of the season, a former player of theirs, and they just go and don't really play too well in in their cup game. And it's just, I don't know, there's something going on in Manchester right now because it is not they're not playing like they're the most historic club in the history of the Premier League, and losing at Old Trafford in the third round of the FA Cup, albeit it is to Brighton, who are just a gutsy club. Um, it really is tough to watch. Because it's just so dysfunctional. There's no belief. They're not playing together. There's no fight. There's no energy, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Manchester United moving forward. Because I think that obviously they're going to have to make a decision with Bruno Fernandes at the end of the season. Because if they're kind of in this rebuilding phase of their club, and it's really hard for me to say that there would be a rebuilding phase for a club as big, arguably the biggest club in the world in Manchester City, or the biggest club in Europe at least, or in England at least. And it's just tough to watch. But yeah, we'll move into some other games. We had Chelsea beating Charlton 5-1 at home. We had Tottenham losing to Villa. I mean, Thomas Frank just cannot catch a break after being caught with the Arsenal Cup in a game a few weeks ago. We had Manchester City just completely annihilating Exeter 10-1. And that kind of brings me into my next talking point, which is the signing of um, Antoine Semenyo, because he bagged he's bagged 2 goals already for City, one in his first match with City against Exeter, and then one against Newcastle yesterday. And there's something about his play on the wing, and he was playing on the right flank yesterday um, against Newcastle, and I think that he's naturally better on the left just because of his. I think he's more of an inside forward, and I think his ability to take on defenders and cut back into his strong foot is really what makes him special. And his goal against Exeter, it looked like he was in cruise control, just blowing past the defender and rolling it past the keeper. And I just it's going to be really interesting with that midfield with Ryan Cherky and the form that he's in, with Phil Foden playing as well as he is. And then you always have Erling Haaland drawing so much attention to himself. I think that Antoine Semenyo is going to go down as one of the best signings in this transfer window and maybe of this past year, all encompassing for 72 million euros. He went from Bournemouth to City. Um, and it's really just it's going to be an unbelievable title race. Arsenal is still, I believe it is 6 points clear. They are 6 points clear, but City, they just will go in streaks where they just don't drop points. And I think that is really what's going to be the scary thing about having them, as an Arsenal fan, kind of knocking on the door the whole season. But they're unbelievable, and their style of football, still pet ball, is just unbelievable to watch. And so, speaking of some other transfers, I'm going to get into a few other significant transfers that have happened since the beginning of the window. So one that happened in the last few days was Atletico sold Conor Gallagher to Tottenham for 40 million euros, and I think that it's going to be really intriguing to watch such a playmaking midfielder who is so savvy in passing and who is an Englishman coming back to the Premier League, and I think that he should never have really left, but I think you're chasing different career results, and it just didn't really stick over in Atletico in Spain. But I think that it's going to be an interesting fit because Thomas Frank is, he's struggling, and there must be something in the locker room. But you have guys like Xavi Simons, you have guys like Richarlison, you have Randall Colomwani, you have Mohamed Kudus, who you can play from a central position, and I think that it's going to be a very telling sign of the future of Thomas Frank if he cannot create some sort of spark attacking wise, because he has plenty of talented players at his disposal. And now with the addition of a creative midfielder like Conor Gallagher, I think you have to be able to be more creative in your attacking play. I'm going to keep moving forward from Tottenham. Brennan Johnson goes to Palace for 40 million euros. I think this is going to be um, it's going to be interesting because Brennan Johnson struggled, only had a few goal contributions this season at Tottenham, only 24 years of age. And I think that Palace, despite getting knocked out in the FA Cup, they're just a very well managed football club. And there's just something about the south side of London that they just always play people tough. And I think coming off of the FA Cup win, that gave them belief in every single match they play. And it's going to be brilliant to watch because Brennan Johnson, like I said, is only 24 years of age and has kind of been a misfit a little bit at Tottenham recently, but he will be joining a club that is going to really look for him to make an instant impact, which I think could bring some pressure. And I think that playing at Tottenham was already a lot of pressure, so it should have prepared him for this. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. And this was after he joined Tottenham from Forest in the 2023-2024 before that season, or in the middle of the season in September for 55 million euros. So it's going to be very interesting. This is a guy who needs to play more football and play minutes and he's only played 41% of the minutes this year. He started 38% of the games. He has 2 goals and 18 appearances in league play. And it's just, especially not that Brennan Johnson was going to be on a World Cup squad, but he needs to play meaningful minutes to be able to prove himself over the rest of his career because he is still so young, and his ability to create on the wing is going to be something to watch. Some other notable transfers. Let's see. Who do I want to highlight? We had Tati Castellanos moving from Lazio center forward to West Ham for 29 million euros. That will be a search for a goal scoring threat for West Ham as they are, bottom of the table right now, close to, and they really need to start kicking it into overdrive a little bit and try and score more goals simply. But the Tati Castellanos has 2 goals, 3 assists, and 11 appearances in Serie A this year, and it's going to be interesting. He scored a goal in the FA Cup already for West Ham, and in one appearance in the Premier League has not gotten on the score sheet yet. So that'll be very interesting to monitor. Let me check out a few more transfers that we can highlight. Let me see. So we have who else is there? Because this is recent transfers of note. Um, we have, let's see, we have Aston Villa signing another winger, a 19-year-old winger, Allison, Brazilian from Grêmio in Serie A in Brazil. And that will be another an intriguing buy because he is so young, and this could be. I think everybody's kind of searching for that next Estevao and that young Brazilian talented winger with just magic feet, with the ability to, in a couple of years, maybe turn a profit if they were to sell him to a bigger club. So that is going to wrap up our transfer recap. I think I've covered pretty much everything I would like to. Um, there is one more match that I would like to highlight in the FA Cup. That would be Wrexham and Nottingham Forest. Wrexham, if you do not know, is the story of the club who started in the National League in the fifth tier and are owned by Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds. And they beat their first Premier League side in 26 years in the FA Cup, beating Nottingham Forest in penalties. And it was just back and forth, end to end, 3-3, going into extra time, scoreless in extra time, goes to penalties, and Arthur Okonkwo makes a huge save at the end to win them the game. And it's a story of a club from a small town who just have a lot of fight and they play pridefully. And I think that they are the type of club that people need to not model off of, because not everybody's going to have Hollywood ownership, but they need to look at the type of heart that they bring every single game. And their manager, Phil Parkinson, instills this type of courage and this type of confidence in them that is not seen at even some Premier League sides. And so they sit only a few points out of the championship playoff. So it's going to be amazing to watch down the stretch. The championship is what some tout as the most competitive league in the world because it's physical. It is people playing desperate to get up and get their side back up into the Premier League. And actually, I stand corrected. Wrexham is 1 point out of a playoff spot in the championship. The championship is table looks like this: is Coventry in first with 52 points, followed by Middlesbrough, Ipswich, Preston, Millwall, and Watford making up the top six, followed by Hull, Stoke, Wrexham, and Bristol in the top 10. But then the automatic or the qualifying for the championship playoff is Watford in sixth place with 41 points. And if you go all the way down to 12th place, you have Leicester with 37 points, only 4 points off. You go down to Derby in 13th place, only 6 points off with 35 points. So it's gonna be unbelievable watching. In 14th, Tom Brady, minority ownership. Birmingham, they have 34 points. They're 7 points off. So it's going to be unbelievable to watch. If you want to get into football and want to see what the passion is all about and want to see guys who are playing like their hair's on fire every single match, I recommend to watch the championship. A lot of games are on CBS Sports on weekends here in America, but you can find ways to watch the game. If you have ESPN Plus, you can watch a lot of those games. Not a sponsor, by the way. Um, but yeah, that's covering a little bit more. I wanted to talk about Chelsea's new manager, Liam Rosenior, who is taking over a an interesting situation because it's a club that is in the semifinal of the Carabao Cup and who have the utmost talent and are historic and have passionate fans, yet they play uninspired. And I think that Liam Rosenior, if you haven't heard him speak, look him up on YouTube because this is a guy that I want to play for. And I haven't played soccer since second grade. And I miss. I wish I played. I wish I played football longer. But it's he's bringing this culture shift to Chelsea, and it seems like he is making a point that it's not about tactics the rest of the season. It's about rebuilding the culture that Chelsea misses of playing for each other, playing hard, and playing inspired, because that is really what they've been missing this whole season. And pivoting off of the topic of William Rosenior, I'm going to go to the FA Cup semi or the Carabao Cup semifinal that was today between Arsenal and Chelsea. And Arsenal beats Chelsea 3-2 away at Stamford Bridge in the first leg. taking it back to the Emirates up 3-2 on aggregate, and they had goals. The scoring was started from Ben White off of a corner for Set Piece FC, and um, it's classic. I mean, it was early in the match, and it seems like the timing of Arsenal's runs during set pieces are just beautiful. They are so down to a T. And Arsenal has now just brought in a throw-in coach who's going to try and give them a leg up on throw-ins. And I think that the people that for the record, I was ironically calling them Set Piece FC, but they are taking advantage of a part of the game that it seems like people sometimes take for granted, and is set pieces. And it is a chance for you to run a play. And it's one of the only times in football you can truly run a set play, hence it being called a set piece. But, anyways, in the game, in the 49th minute, Victor Gyökeres bagged a goal for the first time in what feels like months, and he needed it. It was Bukayo Saka working down the right flank, overlapping run from Ben White, who centers the ball into the box. The keeper had some trouble with it, and it was tapped home by Gyökeres. But those who say, it might have been a cheap goal, those are the types of goals you need from a true center forward and a true number 9. And it's kind of Johnny on the spot and really go and just find a way to put the ball in the back of the net. So it was brilliant to watch. In the 57th minute, Garnacho scored his first of 2. His second was in the 83rd minute, which was following Martin Zubamendi's goal to make it 3-1, and the game ended 3-2 going back to the Emirates. And I will say, Chelsea did look more inspired today, and it's only been a handful of days since Liam Rosenior, a little over a week since he took charge, and it's cool to see, because it seemed like, especially Garnacho, when he made the game 3-2, he looked like a man possessed, and I think it's big for him. It's big for his confidence ahead of a World Cup, and I think that Chelsea, despite this result, needed that type of performance that was gutsy, that was till the end, till the 90th minute, with 5 minutes of extra time, and really just gave it their all. And then on the other side of the semifinal in the Carabao Cup was Manchester City and Newcastle. And Manchester City ended up winning this game 2-0 based off of an Antoine Semenyo goal in the 53rd minute and a Ryan Cherky goal in the 99th minute in extra time, or in added time, excuse me. And it's gonna get a little bit scary, because City have such a dynamic attack and so many weapons, and they have Doku and Semenyo on each flank during this game, and they were just controlling the wings. And then you just have Erling Haaland just taking up space and drawing defenders in, and it really is it's beautiful football to watch. It might be boring to some, kind of boring in a different way than Arteta ball is, but just so ticky tacky. And it's gonna be a tremendous title finish, as I was saying. So City go home up 2-0 on aggregate. Arsenal go back to the Emirates up 3-2 on aggregate. And the next games are, let me see. The next games are, let me see. That is Carabao Cup schedule. So the second leg of these matches, Arsenal will play host to Chelsea on February 3rd, and City will play host to Newcastle the following day on February 4th, to see who will go on and play the Carabao Cup final. And that will be held at the most historic venue in all of football, at Wembley Stadium, at the National Team Stadium. Let me think of a few other things real quick. I'm going to highlight the African Cup of Nations, who are now going to see Morocco face Senegal in the final game of the African Cup of Nations. So the African Cup of Nations final will be held on Sunday, this coming Sunday. January 18th at 1 p.m. Central Time between, as I said, Morocco and Senegal. Morocco is led by Brahim Diaz, still doing his thing with 5 goals in the match or in the tournament. And Senegal is led by Nicholas Jackson and Sadio Mane, among others. And it's going to be great because as I've touched on it previously, they play with a different type of heart in the African Cup of Nations. There seems to be some pride, more pride than usual that goes along there because these guys feel like as African footballers, are talked about in a different sense than a lot of the European footballers or the South American footballers, and don't gain enough respect. And it's gonna be unbelievable to watch. See if we can get a run from one of those African nations in the World Cup this summer. I think everybody would, no one will be shocked if Morocco does it again, or even if Mo Salah led Egypt goes on a run because he seems to turn into some otherworldly form in or when playing for the national team. One thing that I wanted to kind of go back on was the situation with Gabriel Martinelli. Um, and in the Liverpool match, when he ended up, it looked like, I mean, there was a lot of time wasting going on, but he seemed to throw the ball on top of and push Connor Bradley, who ended up suffering a serious knee injury towards the end of the match. And Martinelli later apologized and said he reached out to um, Connor Bradley, not realizing the severity of the injury. And I think Arne Slot put it perfectly when he said, no right-minded individual would do this knowing that a player has suffered a serious injury. And I think it's a shame because this kind of leads me into another point, which is how tough of a job it is to be a referee, because when do you know if someone is truly injured or not? And not that, and I in no way, shape, or form can tolerate any of this behavior by Gabriel Martinelli because it is truly it's just behavior that does not belong in the sport because that's not sportsmanship. I get it's the heat of the moment, but we just need to be better. But it is like Arne Slot put it perfectly. Martinelli he's a good lad, and you don't he just wouldn't do this if it was involving a player that he knew was seriously injured in the moment. And it did look tough, but Martinelli, he was trying to play the throw quick, and there had been some time wasting by Liverpool, but still it is just there's no room in football for that. But I'm glad that Martinelli kind of took accountability for it, and I think that I wish Connor Bradley a very speedy recovery. Um, Another thing I wanted to highlight before we kind of wrap up the show is that Real Madrid have fired Xavi Alonso after, only a couple of months at the helm after leaving Leverkusen and being one of the greatest managers in world football over the past 2 years. And I think that the situation with Vinny, and I think that Kylian Mbappe, as he is one of the greatest footballers in the world, is not the greatest leader. After he refused the guard of honor after the Spanish Super Cup. And I think that it is a situation where a team like Real Madrid is so young and so talented that they like to point fingers at anybody but themselves. And I think they chased out one of the best managers in that they could have potentially had. And it's not like Real Madrid is having a terrible season. Real Madrid sits 4 points out of first place behind Barcelona in La Liga, with 14 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses. It's a good season. And I I think it was a little bit unfair to Xavi Alonso because he is such a great coach and went on a limb to advance his career and go to a club the size of Real Madrid from Leverkusen. And I think that he just deserved better because he is truly class. And now they're kind of kicking around the tires, or there's a rumor of Jurgen Klopp potentially going to take his spot. But I just don't see a world where anybody would want to go coach that club right now. I mean, there obviously people want to go coach at Real Madrid, but if you're Jurgen Klopp, what is the draw? There is there it there's no there's nothing that it would do for me at that point. You've done everything, and these players just seem to be so stubborn. and just unable to accept blame and look in the mirror and really, kind of respect a manager. And I think that it's going to be tough for them until they get a proper captain in there to kind of change up the locker room. So to wrap up this second episode of PSN FC, I'm going to run you guys through a few of the upcoming matches I'm looking forward to this weekend. So the first one is the Manchester Derby between United and City at Old Trafford at 6:30 Central Time this Saturday on USA Network. Again, I am not sponsored or affiliated by NBC. I am just telling you where to watch the game. And then later that day, we have Leeds hosting Fulham. Leeds is a squad possessed right now with the Medford Messi, Brendan Aronson from New Jersey, my home state, is playing in the best form of his career right now and looking to, keep Leeds on this track and potentially, solidify his spot on the World Cup squad for the United States this coming summer. We have Tottenham playing host to West Ham. The Spurs, they need to really, they need to have something positive happen because it just seems like there's just a mess right now. It'll be interesting to see how much Conor Gallagher plays at 11:30 on NBC on Saturday, 11:30 Central Time. That is Nottingham Forest plays host to the Arsenal, which will be fantastic to watch. Let's see if Arsenal can keep pace at the top of the table. And then Sunday, we go to Wolves hosting Newcastle at 8 Central Time, Villa hosting Everton at 10:30. Villa looking to kind of keep pace with City and Arsenal and see if they can kind of stay up in that three. And then we go to Monday and we have Brighton playing host to Bournemouth. So that will pretty much do it for this second episode of the Pyramid Sports Network Football Club. I, again, am your host, Quinn Blackman. I would love for you all to comment anything you want to hear about next show. Go like the Instagram post. Go comment on the Instagram post. Tell me what you want to hear about. Tell me what you want to see. I'll have stories up. Send us things on Instagram. Send us comments on YouTube. Subscribe. Do it all. And I appreciate your guys' support, and I will see you next time.